Hello. Hello. Hi.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. How's it going? Doing great. I'm going to just go ahead and as housekeeping, as usual, I'm going to just go ahead and mute everybody. Please don't unmute yourself during the call if you can avoid it. Otherwise, I hope you're having an awesome day so far. It's just been so inspiring as usual, seeing how everybody's responding to what's being taught and just the connections that are being made through this already is just blows all of our minds. We're so excited for like the next phase of things. Like basically finding the target is the first part of it. And today we're going to go through kind of like the last part of finding the target and really training ourselves to prepare ourselves to make the kinds of music that is highly licensable, highly marketable. But then like on from there, we're going to be starting to dig into songwriting and production and so much fun stuff to start to dig in with all of that. So yeah. Oh, and thanks, by the way. I am feeling a million times better. I still have the Kleenex handy just in case, but it's kind of on the tail end. Definitely feeling a little more like myself. For once again, for everybody who hops on the call, I'm going to probably say this quite a bit. Please don't unmute yourself like until I may have time at the end to answer a couple of questions once we go through what we're going through today. But we're going through a lot, so I want to make sure I got time to do that. So it just minimizes distractions when you keep yourself muted, and I really appreciate it. Yeah. Oh yeah. Good morning, New Zealand. Yeah, it all around. We're global things. So good morning, everybody who's in another country, and or good evening, probably depending on like what part of the world you're in. But it's about noon here in Southern California. It looks like a beautiful day out. Hopefully, I'll get to hop out and enjoy some of it a little bit later this afternoon. Nash Vegas. Is that like a cross between Nashville and Las Vegas? What's that? Yes. All right. So diving in today. So today, what I want to talk about is ear training. So ear training is it's such an important part of just what I do every day now as a producer and just as somebody who's a music professional, songwriter, person who's in the licensing world, who sends out pitches, is pitching stuff, and yeah. So it's like it's so important because you have to really start getting your ears kind of in tune with what is being used, but having a deeper understanding than just like, here's a few references. It's like what I'm going to talk to you about today is really going to help you to get a deeper understanding of the music that you're listening to. And I promise you, if you start to put this to practice, you're never going to hear songs the same way again. And I think it's actually for the better. You know, it's actually like, now I get to enjoy music. It's almost like there's like a 3D-ness to the music that you get when you start to get a little bit more understanding and perspective on like the entire picture of what is working, how a song is working. And I'm going to break it down for you Just going to do that today. So the first thing I just want to like give a little talk about ear training. It's something everybody wants to do. Everybody should do it. Something when you start practicing, then it'll just become part of your natural workflow. Your ears will change, your perception of music will deepen, and as a result, you're going to make better decisions across the board about the music you create because it's informed by the work you put into educating your ears. You want to be listening to what's working. So we've already kind of spent a lot of time actually on finding out like what is working in licensing right now. And each one of you have spent time like digging into like, well, what angle of licensing music excites me, makes me feel excited about making music. What's the kind of music that I can really sink my teeth into and want to create myself, the types of music. So that's a big part of it, but it's not just about the songs you listen to. It's about how you listen to them and what you listen for. So first off, this is just something as a practice for ear training. You want to listen to your music in an environment where you can hear the song fully without major distractions. It could be your studio or perhaps your living room if you have a stereo system in there. You probably don't want to do your listening through headphones or earbuds, but that's okay if that's all you have available. It's worth noting that a lot of music, you can't make a mix nowadays without taking into account this and just what your song sounds like on the phone. So there's just, you can't do that. So otherwise, like if your song sounds crappy on just a phone speaker, then, you might as well put a nail through it because it's just not going to work because that's literally like the context, which some people, sorry here. Not sure what happened there. Not sure. Exit full screen. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there. Please don't hit share your screen or any of the other, like it's just the unmute and also just sharing your screen. Please don't do that. It's just a little distracting to everybody. So I'm just going to hit the mute button again one more time. All right, cool. Back to it. So what I'm going to go through now is like everything once you have yourself set up in an environment that you want to listen to your music in, these are the things you want to be listening for. First thing is like your tempo, like how fast is the song? This is actually way more important than you think. And if you haven't really spent any time like thinking about this a lot in your productions, it's a really good exercise to start like literally when you have a reference to go into, and I'm actually gonna, don't worry, by the way, you don't have to take notes on any of this. I am going to copy and paste my literal notes so that you'll have them fully because it's gonna be important for the assignment. You're not going to have to worry about any of that. Oh, it's okay, Anthony. Don't worry about it. Stuff happens on these calls, I'm just trying to like do the best I can with just keeping everything on focus. All good, man. Yeah, and welcome everybody who hopped on a little late. We're talking about ear training here. I'm going to take a drink of coffee and then we'll keep going. Coffee is very important for me. So knowing how fast your song is important, it is important because there's certain types of music, certain genres where if you're making music that's a little faster or a little slower, your song is going to stick out. And you want to kind of know what what songs tend to get used. If you're going for a certain genre, it helps to know like what the tempo is. There's a really easy way to figure it out. If you're totally like clueless about how to figure out like what the BPM is, actually, like I couldn't tell you if I just listened to a song like what the BPM is, but I have like a counter tool that I use. It's just literally like a website where all you do is just hit the space bar to the quarter notes and it shows you what the BPM is on it. It's pretty awesome. I'm going to share that with everybody. And we'll do that. I'll just copy and paste that to the Facebook group with the assignment. So you can use that tool to find out all of that. Next thing I want to talk about is like the drum groove. So some songs don't have drums. That's cool. But a lot of music has drums. They have a groove. And what's the groove like? What are the parts to the beat? You can think about the kick. There's different elements to a beat. Kick, snare are like the two main ones. And then there's like tops, there's toms. There's different aspects to the drum groove. But like, what's the groove like? You want to start to kind of listen to like, what kind of pocket, what kind of, is there a swing to it? Is it kind of like on the like four to the floor, just kind of no swing at all? Is there like some kind of four to the floor thing, but then the tops are kind of swinging over the top of it? And when I say tops, I'm talking about like stuff like hats and like different percussive elements are typically what's considered like the tops on a beat. So the drum groove, another very important thing to think about when you're listening to the music, that you're looking to create music in the same genre, kind of in the same ballpark. Next thing I want to talk about is like bass presence. And this is where like there's a certain amount of ear training where you just want to start to like feel the music. There's a definitely a part where you use your brain with this, but there's also just like a feeling. Like when I sit in front of my monitors here and I'm listening to a song, there like a kick will like just kind of hit me in a different way depending on the song. And after a while, you kind of get used to like a kick that sounds like really satisfying, and it hits you in a way that you're like, yeah, that's what I would like to have. And I'd like to feel that same, like those same vibrations that come in. I'd like to feel that same way when I'm hearing the kick in my song. So a certain aspect of this is like we listen to songs that are really well produced, professionally recorded and mastered. And what ends up happening is we start to compare everything that we're doing just by virtue of like, if we're listening to professionally recorded music all the time, it definitely elevates the kind of our taste in what is that kick going to hit the bar. It definitely, like, that's just one of the side effects of doing this ear training. But once again, getting back to it, bass presence. How do you feel the bass in the song? Is it clean? Is it a little dirty? Is it heavy in the subs or more low to low mids? How does the bass line play with the drum groove? How do they relate? So it's like there's a lot of times with the rhythm section in a song, there's a relationship between the bass and the kick. Sometimes you can hear some side chain compression going on with the bass to the kick, which we'll go in more into. I know somebody in the group posted a couple of times about side chaining as a technique for the Monday music breakdown that I did, and it's great. It's a technique that I use for all different kinds of applications. But one of the main applications that you'll use it for is for ducking the bass, so that when the kick comes in, the bass isn't like competing with the kick for some of that low end real estate. But yeah, like what is the relationship between the bass and the kick? And when we're talking about bass, we're also talking about 808 kind of stuff. Like usually with the 808s, they kind of come in with the kick, but not always the case. So it's like, what is the relationship that you have between these bass elements? And so your drum groove and your bass, how are they playing together? It's another thing you want to start to think about. So once again, getting back to like the sonic feel and the quality of the sounds. In the kick, the snare, every part of the song, what characteristics do they have? How do they make you feel? How do they hit you? This can actually be applied to pretty much any instrument, with a guitar part, a vocalist. Like, what's the sonic characteristic? Is it like, it could even be like everything's like hard filtered and distorted and things like that. But how does that make you feel? So just feeling the music, the sonic characteristics of it, the quality, the fidelity of the instruments and the way they're recorded is the next thing you want to start to listen for. Then it's arrangement. Arrangement is like such a huge part. So by the way, also, I'm going to be going into a bunch of stuff that we are going to further elaborate upon as the course develops. When these things apply to songwriting and to production, we're going to be going deeper into these things. So don't worry, I know there might be a bunch of questions about arrangements and how to arrange your songs and things like that. We don't have to worry about that today. What I'm saying is like the time to get like really like to start to have awareness about this stuff is now though. And just start to have awareness specifically with the songs that you've chosen as your references. Talk about the arrangement. How is the song arranged? Like the verses, the B sections, the hooks, the post, the bridge. Like how are these different parts sequenced in the song in a way that makes it easily understandable by the listener in the context of whatever genre of music you're making? So that's probably the simplest way I could put that together for you in terms of like what arrangement is and its importance. But I think like breaking down any song you're listening to, you should be able to identify the different sections of the song. There will usually be clear changes in the dynamics of a song that will kind of key you. And often there's transitions that key you into when a section is changing. And you'll be surprised when you start to see, oh, okay, so in a lot of pop music, there's a lot of 8-bar patterns, a lot of 16-bar patterns. And, you know, then you'll just be like, wow, you know, maybe I was making it more complex for myself than I needed it to be. Or maybe you're like doing exactly what it is that your music needs to do in this genre. But it's like paying attention to this stuff, you start to see the patterns in the music that is being used. So just starting to pay attention to the arrangement of things. And sometimes you'll have like really interesting twists on the arrangements. So maybe it'll start out with like a little thing from, you know, maybe even like the Post or something. And then it drops into the verse, and then it goes on. And then, but you know, you wouldn't typically start a song with a Post, but it's done, you know? So, but it's just like getting a little understanding for, if you've never really listened for the arrangement of a song, this is something that's very important to do, because you want to start practicing this as you're writing and as you're producing. The next thing, I want to talk about key. So key of the song actually does factor in quite a bit into a lot of things. Every time, you can assume when a song is professionally recorded that probably 9 times out of 10, the key has been intentionally selected out of like potentially like, you know, 3 or 4 keys that could have been good, but they just picked the key that was like the best key for the singer. Typically is what you do is because the vocal is so important. It blows. I mean, I just know from my own experience, I used to like long time ago, I used to just write a song, and it was just like, that was how I wrote the song. I wrote it on guitar. I never really played around with like dropping it or stepping it up. And I actually like lost opportunities to make the song better than it was, because I didn't spend the time just figuring out like what's the ideal key. But as far as like listening, it's like finding out what the key your song is in. You'll find that sometimes in different genres, there are very popular keys for different songs, for different genres, different keys. Different keys can also elicit different moods. Like minor keys, obviously, are gonna create like different emotions than, say, like a major key. So how does that affect the overall vibe of the music? Something that as you start to ear train, you'll start to pick up on these things, and then you'll start to make decisions, intelligent decisions with your songwriting and with your production that help elevate the emotion that you're trying to create with the music you're making. So yeah, key is another one. And it's actually not that hard to find the key of a song. I'm sure we can pull together some resources. I usually just find the tonic of the key. And with a lot of the songs that I do, it's like a lot of the stuff is like major key kind of stuff. So it's usually pretty easy for me to find a key. But as far as like questions about like how do I find the key of the song, there's definitely like ways you can go about it. And I could definitely pull some resources together if anybody's having a difficult time finding that. Next thing I want to talk about is chord progression. So what's the chord progression of the song? And you're going to need to have a little bit of basic understanding of, once you identify the key, then you should be able to find out like what you'll be able to figure out the chords, and then what the relationship of those chords is. Whether it's the one that a lot of times it's like there's different in pop music, for example, you know, it's like the major and then the 4 and the 5, or, you know, there's different types of the chord progressions are actually standard for a reason. And you'll find that there's a lot of similarities in popular music in terms of the chord progressions that are being used. There's almost a formula to it. But you'll be surprised sometimes to discover, like, once again, people will do really interesting twists on things. But understanding what the chord progression is of the song that you're basically, the songs that you have selected will really, it will definitely be like an educational thing for you to understand. It's also really important to understand, because chord progressions, in my experience with things, are one of the ways in which you can, it's almost like a conversational thing you're having with the listener. It's almost a language thing, because these chord progressions have been heard before. They're understandable. The reason why they work in so many different songs is because they just work, and then people are used to them. So in a way, when they hear that chord progression, you may mask that chord progression in a really interesting production and an interesting vocal top line that doesn't make it boring or like stale at all. But they're still going to have that familiarity with the chord progression. So getting a little bit of clarity on, like, you know, what is the chord progression? It's going to be a really good thing. And I listen for this quite a bit when I'm listening to music now. And it actually helps inform decisions that I make all the time when I am creating music. If I don't know what to do, I literally just pull open some of the standard chord progressions, which I can definitely share with the group too, if it's helpful. But I think, like, depending on your genre, that's going to, certain genres use different types of chord progressions. So, but some of them are like kind of the standard ones that are really just classics. But chord progression. Next thing, listen to, yep, totally. It's pretty easy if you have your guitar or your piano to find the tonal center. Yep. Yeah, and totally. Like, there's so many popular chord progressions out there. But I'd say that there's probably like 5 or 6 of them that are kind of the standards. And then there's other ones that are like kind of more modern ones. And you can always play around with it, but it kind of, in a way, the way chord progressions tend to work is you have like kind of the tonal center, which is kind of the key of the song. So you have like the tonic, and that's kind of the place most of the time that you want to keep coming back to. So in a way, chord progressions are just a journey to bring you back to the tonic, which is kind of like the satisfying kind of center of the key of the song, So, and that's like one of the great things about dynamics. You can have dynamics in the chord progression. You can have dynamics in the production of the music. I'm going to talk more about dynamics later. By the way, don't worry. I'm throwing a ton of stuff at you all. Don't worry. You don't have to take any notes. I'm going to just like copy and paste my notes and put it straight into Facebook. So you'll be able to review those, and you'll be able to ask any questions as well in the Facebook group. But I may also have a couple moments to answer questions before I hop off the call here today. Yeah. Yeah, unexpected chords are okay. I just saw that question in here because it's an interesting thing. But I would say that, like, with all this, it's like there's rules of making music, but as soon as you know the rules, you want to start kind of throwing some of them out occasionally, but you kind of need to do it in service of the song. So if just throwing a random chord that's not even in the key necessarily and kind of jars the listener, may or may not serve the song, you know? So at the end of the day, if the chord change doesn't serve the song and it's kind of jarring, then it's probably not going to be the right move. But there's so many cases out there where there'll be like interesting like chord progressions that do not seem to fit the standards. And, you know, it's like, that's where the creativity comes in. And you can learn a lot from that too by studying the chord progressions of other songwriters and other artists that are out there. So I think it's just a little bit of like, you'll experiment, you'll play around with that and find what works for your style of music. And yeah, I think the answer to that question is it depends. So getting back to this, so the next thing I really want people to start listening to is the singer. Not because I'm a singer and I like being the center of attention when I'm on a track or something like that. It's literally because the singer and the vocal top line on a song is probably like the most important part of any vocal song. And so studying the singer and the vocal is really important. And it's really important to get like in your ears kind of the characteristics of a professionally recorded vocal. What's the timbre of the singer's voice for your genre? What's their singing style? Like, is it like, I don't give a F, or is it like kind of like super empowering and inspired? Is it like laid back and almost like not enunciating? Is it, what's the style of the singing? Because the style and the vibe of the singing is sometimes way more important than the actual content of the lyrics. Sometimes I actually would probably argue more of the time it's the emotion and the style and vibe of the singer than the actual like content of the lyrics that they're singing. And so here's the other question with that is like, how does the singer perfectly match the vibe of the track? Because tracks that are really working, that's always the case. The vocalist is like, it's like the perfect vocal to fit into the vibe of the track. How is the vocalist accomplishing this? You know, we don't know sometimes, but like there's things that we can learn by thinking about that relationship. Just by the way that the vocal sits in the mix, by the way it's being sung, by the space the vocalist is giving for the track to play with the vocal. There's a lot of things to consider there. This goes straight into the actual top line of the song. So top lines, for anybody who doesn't know what a top line is, that's totally cool. There's time I didn't know what a top line was either. A top line is basically like the lyrics plus the vocal melody of basically like the lead vocal melody plus the lyrics of the song make up the top line. So when I say like I'm going to top line this track, it means I'm going to write a melody and I'm going to write some lyrics on top of that, and I'm going to sing it. Is usually what in the context of what I'm doing in the studio, which I do quite a bit of that. So the top line, it's just like really lockstep and key with the singer. It's like, how does the top line serve the song? What is the relationship between the track and the vocal melody? How does the top line develop? Does it start out kind of sparse, like monotone almost? This is actually a common technique in pop music, is it'll start kind of sparse and monotone almost, like kind of staying on the same note. And then what it'll do is like maybe during the B section, it'll start to kind of pick up a little bit, build some energy. And then by the time the hook hits, it's like full on, jumps an octave. Like, so it not only like increases like the complexity of what's being sung, but it also like by the time it hits the chorus, there'll sometimes be a very big leap in the actual interval of the note. So the note might go up an entire octave. And for anybody who doesn't have like formal music training, don't worry. These terms are not going to seem alien to you forever once you start to like dig into this stuff. It's actually pretty easy to pick up. Didn't take too long for me to pick it up, and I literally had no formal music training until about 10 years ago. So trust me on this. If any of this stuff is going over your head, there's tons of people in this group that can help you to understand some of the basics that I'm talking about. But yeah, it's like getting back to the top line. How does it develop? How does the dynamic pick up? And you'll notice a lot of times there's like a great change, even like from like the verse to like the pre-chorus, or I tend to call it like the B section. Between those two parts, it's like there can be a drastic change. You're looking for these little shifts in like all aspects of the song. Sorry, let me turn my ringer off here so it doesn't interrupt the proceedings here. I love it. I think it's Anthony. I keep seeing him pick up his guitar. For some reason, you're like the one person that's on my screen. Hopefully everybody can see me. Yeah. So getting back to this, we're covering a lot of ground, and this is all like, all of this stuff is really important. So I hope that everybody now starts to understand, if you didn't understand before, like what Kathy and I are really trying to impart to you is like all the really important parts of this process to set you up in a place where you're really prepared to start writing the kinds of songs that can be marketable and competitive. These are the things that everybody who's out there, who's gunning for syncs, who's producing stuff, these are the things that people are listening for, and they're creating their own music out of this experience and having this ear training already. So what we want to do is we want to give you this ear training so that you can take that in to your songwriting, which we're all going to be starting down that journey really quick. So we're just going to keep going here. I got a few more things I want to talk about, and then I'm going to give you your assignment for the week, and then I'll have an opportunity to probably ask field a few questions if people have questions about stuff. So next thing I want to talk about after the top line. So part of the top line is the lyrics of the song, obviously, because the top line is the vocal melody plus the lyrics. The lyrics, so how do the lyrics serve the song? Do they fit the vibe of the track like a glove? How are they fresh? Like cliche lyrics are like really the thing, probably more than anything else from what I've seen. that will make your song sound amateur. What we're looking for when we're making music for sync, people when they're looking for music, they want stuff that's cool, they want stuff that's fresh, they want fresh takes on topics that have been explored almost ad nauseum. So it's like, how are you taking how is this reference that you're listening to taking a fresh approach? And sometimes it's okay to throw cliches in there, but like sometimes the cliches are ways to bring people back in once you've expressed something super fresh and creative. There's kind of a conversational thing that can happen with that I've found. Ingrid Michaelson is somebody who's like a master at this. She's somebody who can kind of take a cliche and kind of like just slightly tweak it. Some of her lyrics seem like they're fairly standard kind of lyrics, but you'll find there's just like these really creative ways in which she takes these things that we all say all the time and just puts a little spin on it that makes it really interesting. So, but it's like, how are the lyrics that you're listening to? How are they fresh and interesting? Are they conversational? Or are they more like just kind of high and lofty, speaking more general terms? What's the rhyme scheme like? Are there a lot of lyrics? Like sometimes it's like once again, this can kind of fluctuate in a top line. You can have like sections where there's like a lot of lyrics and then there's like almost none. And then it comes back and then there's just like even more lyrics than there was before. But we're looking for, when we're making music and we're listening to music, we're listening for these kinds of dynamic shifts, because you can rest assured that whoever is listening to your song and making a decision as to whether to give it 10 more seconds or hit forward to the next thing that's in their playlist, they're going to be listening for these kinds of keys and these kinds of changes. There's a guy named Brian Vickers. He works for a trailer house he works for Disney's Trailer House. And he told me once that like, it's like you want to look for like changes, like kind of subtle changes every 4 bars. And then like kind of more, they're kind of listening for more like drastic changes every kind of 8 bars. So it's like to keep the listening, to keep the listener's interest. It's across all these different areas of the track. We're looking to have dynamics, including the lyrics. So how does the lyrical density change in different parts of the song? And how do are there a lot of like short words? Are there longer words that with open vowels that allow the singer to really like open up? I think you'll find a lot of times there aren't a lot of harsh consonants, a lot of sibilant sounds. One thing that I had to kind of rid myself of to a certain extent was, and you'll hear this, it's like a lot of times like decisions are made in the songwriting process to eliminate the number of like hard S's that you have in a top line. That makes it easier to sing with like more conviction. As well, it kind of makes the overall quality of the vocal sound less harsh. But these are things to listen for and see what's working in the references that you've picked out. It's not easy being cheesy. So getting back to here's actually the last one, which I've kind of hinted upon this entire time, which is dynamics. And this is maybe, along with the singer, it's maybe the most important thing is dynamics in a song and how dynamics work in a song. You can hear it. Like, how does a song, because there's something about part of the reason why we love listening to music. I mean, everybody's probably got their own reasons, but I know psychologically part of the reason why people like listening to music is because it takes them on a journey. There's an arc to a song. There's an arc. It starts low, it comes up, then it brings you back down. Then it comes up and it maybe a little higher, brings you back down. Then a lot of times kind of the pop format comes up way high, like to the biggest peak, and then drops off and then the end of the song. But you're hooked by the end of those 3 journeys, those 3 little journeys that you took. And you're like, I want to hear that song again. It's because there's a satisfying thing to being taken somewhere and then being dropped back down. So that's what we're looking for when we're talking about tension and release, rise and fall. Most songs that really work in the licensing world have good dynamics. Sorry, yeah. Thanks everybody for being so good about keeping yourself unmuted. I appreciate it. So yeah, getting back to this, how does the song become more complex and faster? How do things rise up and then drop back down? So this can happen on like a track level, but you also have to keep into account this also happens at the level of each individual instrument too. And you'll be surprised. You'll be listening to the bass and you'll be like, oh, okay, that's like the bass isn't even there in like the verses at all. And then it sometimes the bass isn't there until the chorus at all. And then once it comes back in, it's like simpler and then it picks up. But if it's like a rock song where there's bass like right off the top, maybe it's more like a very like every whole note there's a note. And then during the chorus it really picks up and it's eighths or something like that. So with each individual instrument, you'll see that there's ways in which each instrument can get both like melodically complex as well as like just rhythmically complex and interesting. And this, if it's done in concert, you don't have to do this with every single instrument, but if it's done well in concert, what ends up happening is that like you go from like something that's simple and it almost kind of multiplies because not just one thing is getting more complex, but so many more things are getting more complex and dense. So part of dynamics as well is like layers and new instruments and vocal stacks, and saving some of those vocal stacks and some of those like instruments for the chorus so the chorus can really hit the way that you want it to. But you'll hear this in all the music that if you start listening to it more intentionally, you'll hear this in like almost all music that's going on, unless you're talking about like some kind of explosions in the sky kind of thing, where it's like just kind of like this long form, kind of like even keel for the most part. There's different types of music. I mean, that music is highly licensable and it really doesn't have a ton of dynamics. It has some dynamics, but it's more about the vibe and the space and the atmosphere of it. Which you can find more subtle dynamics with it because, you know, in some of their songs, they'll have like some light percussive elements and things like that. But yeah, that's like all of the things that I just talked about. It's quite a bit, but these are the types of things that you want to start listening to very intently when you're doing your ear training. And this is a really helpful exercise. This is an exercise that was given to me at one point, and I found it really helpful. That's why I'm going to assign this to everybody in the course this week. Your assignment for this week, sorry, I just got to clear up my throat a little bit. Like I said, I'm almost over it, but still a little bit on the tail end of things here. So your assignment for this week, should you choose to accept it, is to take those 4 references that you have and break them down. Like completely break them down, do ear training with these 4 songs and really break them down on all the points that I talked about. You don't have to go into great detail on each one of these, but I'd like you to go through and be fairly thorough in your evaluation of each of these songs as you're listening to them. Just really like getting into these types of like a little bit of the analysis of all these different aspects that the song can have. And I think what you're going to find some really interesting things, I think, especially if your 4 references all kind of have some similarities to them. You're going to find some interesting stuff. Some dots are going to get connected. And then what I want you to do is I want you to take those 4 songs and then I want you to throw them in a playlist. It can be Spotify. It can be whatever platform you use to collect music. I want you to throw them in a Spotify playlist along with like, perhaps like, I want you to have like at least like 10 songs in the playlist. But you can add like another 6 songs. They don't all have to be exactly in the same genre or have the same feel, but they should all be like modern, like stuff recorded in the last couple of years and professionally produced, like songs that really grab you and like, and make you feel, and really like kind of feel like they're really professionally done songs that you can put into a playlist. And then I want you to listen to that playlist 3 times in an environment like I'm describing, like where you're really, I remember when I was in high school, I used to like literally go home and I used to throw on like the newest album that I bought and like close my eyes, listen to the music and just really take it in. What I'd like you to do, you don't have to do that, but what I'm saying is what I want you to do is listen through that playlist like 3 times. And then I want you to report back after you've done this assignment where you've broken down your 4 songs from your references. I want you to listen through this playlist 3 times, and I want you to report back on how, if you're listening to songs differently now, and if so, how. and that's your assignment for the week. So if anything's unclear, don't worry. I'm going to post the assignment again. I'm going to post all my notes from today. I'm going to post it into the group. I think this is going to be a really mind-blowing exercise for everybody, almost everybody. I'm sure some people might be bored by this, but trust me. I think even the people who feel like they already understand all this stuff, I think you will be surprised by what you find when you really like take a deep dive into the songs that you've picked out and really start to pay attention to all this stuff. It's going to really open up your world in terms of like everything that you're doing when it comes to songwriting, and in terms of like just even selecting references from this point forward. It's going to change the way you do everything. Explosions of Sky is so good. Oh yeah, I'm just seeing all these different like call outs to different bands. Yeah, Radiohead. The Bends is one of my favorite albums of all time. I used to do so much graphic design work. I had an internship at a graphic design center, and I probably listened to the Bends probably 500 times while I was designing different websites and things. All right, so yeah, the Bends is so good. Does anybody have any questions? I'm going to open up the floor to like maybe 2 or 3 questions, and then we'll call it here. All right, great. Yeah, thanks. Thanks. I appreciate you, Halstein. Thanks for that, and have a good day. For anybody who has to hop off, that's totally cool. I'll see you next time, and I hope you have an awesome day. But if anybody's got any questions, feel free to speak up. I have a song that I want to do a key change in. Is that not a good idea? Oh, key changes are like, that's a classic like tool. Like, I mean, you hear it all the time. Key changes in like modern music, it's still totally a thing. So, you know, I think there's a cheesy way to do it and there's like a more clever way to do it. But I think at the end of the day, you just got to decide whether it serves the song or not. If it kind of gives it that extra, sometimes the best key changes are the ones where you kind of don't expect it a little bit. I mean, my favorite key change is that, what is it like, what's that song? Creedence Clearwater Revival. What's the name of that song? Looking out my back door. That's probably got my favorite key change of all time. But that one's just such a weird one. So not to say you have to do a weird one, but for sure, like key changes are definitely a part of the production toolkit. They're part of the songwriting toolkit, and you should use it if it seems like it helps. Yeah, it's such a weird one. Do popular songs commonly use relative or parallel chord progressions in the chorus or bridges? You're kind of going above, like, so my music theory background is not that great. So you're actually like going above my like language of that. So I apologize for that, but I don't really know the answer to that question. So apologize for that. How long will be the listening session tomorrow? We're not gonna like talk about like anything like any other calls that are going on. We're just gonna be answering questions on this call that pertain to what I was talking about. Does the playlist have to be all sync songs? No. Your playlist you're gonna have your 4 references that are songs that have been licensed. But like I said, you can pick songs that are not necessarily used in licensing, but I do think that they should be songs that you really love the production on. They should be modern songs from the last couple of years. And yeah, that's really the only restriction. They should be professionally recorded songs that were done in the last couple of years. For our existing songs, would you suggest we rework them to freshen them up after we learn more in the course? Rework them to freshen them up. So my perspective on this is, Barb, is a lot of times it's better for me to just write a new song. You know, I don't really feel like there's any limit to creativity. So I don't really get stuck too much on songs that I wrote in the past. Not to say you couldn't rework a song, but I've never had a song where I wrote it and then I've definitely done some rewriting of songs. But what I find sometimes is when I go back and revisit an old song, there's a part of wherever I was at the time that was expressed that it's hard for me to really get into the spirit of where I was creating from when I was doing that. So for me personally, I don't really do it too much. I'd just rather write a different song a lot of the time. it's something that I practice all the time. So it's not a big deal. If I want to write something new, I'll just write something new. But if you want to revisit stuff, sure. I've just never had a song where I rewrote it and it ended up like being something where it was like highly successful in any way. But that's just me. I'm sure there's I do tend to like now I will say that I do tend to rewrite stuff as I'm like writing it, as like a process. Like rewriting your songs and revisiting your songs before you record them is a really good idea. But if you're talking about something that was already recorded or something like that, or something that you wrote like a couple years ago, I would probably suggest that you'd be better off writing something new, because your whole experience of life has changed since then. But that's just me, you know. For our existing, okay, so we got that one. Are most of the synced songs mastered in the box? I don't think there's a rule with that. You know, you can master stuff in the box and it sounds good. You can hire an outside mastering engineer who has great hardware and it can sound great. So there's no rule with that. And also, it's like most of the time we don't really know what stuff of ours that gets synced, at least to Catch the Moon, which stuff has been mastered in the box and which hasn't. I know for my own library, the stuff that's gotten mastered, it's probably a mix of like stuff that's been professionally mastered by a mastering engineer and stuff that like I've either just like mastered in the box or, you know, somebody that I hired to do the mix mastered it in the box as like part of the package. So it's like it's a mixed bag for me. I don't think you have to mix outside the box or anything like that. How do you approach genres like alt pop when wanting to have recognizable arrangements? Should I look to the main genre of pop first and then look for ways to play around that? I think that's a good idea. I mean, I think if you know the kinds of chord progressions that tend to work in pop, you'll have some different palette choices. And I think that exploring the songs that you have chosen as references will help with that. So you may find that some of the common chord progressions that are out there are actually in some of the songs that you picked already. So yeah, you know, I think as far as like looking to main genres, it doesn't hurt to kind of go back to like what's the base genre, because sometimes like if it's a subgenre, it's based off of like the main genre. So chord progressions are, you know, a pretty big part of what make a song in a certain genre. Certainly blues progressions are a lot different than some of the standard pop progressions, but some of them have some similarities too. So yeah. What else we got? Sorry, it's hard to sometimes scroll down without scrolling down too far. Is the 2 p.m. listening session going to be recorded? Yeah, we record all the sessions that get done. So don't ever worry about any. I usually don't address like when we're doing like lessons stuff about like other calls. But as with this call, every single call that we do is recorded and we always archive it and we make it available for you to be able to listen to. So never a worry there if you can't make a call. When you're talking about more ambient music or post rock, how there is really just an atmospheric sound, do you notice the dynamics are a big part of the change? I feel like the verse is usually more drony and the melody doesn't change a ton until the chorus. I think that it really varies dependent upon, you know, the song and the album. You know, there's different approaches, but the dynamics there's certainly dynamics and developments. Sometimes that development is a change in chords. It can be something, if something drones on like the same chord for like a minute and a half and then shifts to another chord, that's like a major change. That's a dynamic change. Even if like the overall levels of the track and kind of the overall fullness of the track doesn't change, everything just gets like put under the microscope just a little bit more. And you have to kind of think of dynamics in a little bit different way than loudness. So yeah, I think it's gonna depend on the song. I don't think there's any rules about it. Let's see. What does in the box mean? Great question. In the box means that, for example, you might have a mastering engineer who has pieces of hardware that are outside of the computer that they are using to enhance the audio and make it basically like broadcast ready. So basically the mastering process is what I'm talking about. So if they're doing it in the box, instead of sending the audio out to some select outboard gear that they might have, like actual physical pieces of hardware that sit outside of the computer, they're just doing everything inside the computer using plugins. So that's like the difference between, so they will use, so a lot of times they'll like, there's really good software emulations of different like outboard hardware. For example, UAD makes a really great emulation of the Massive Passive mastering EQ. I have the hardware and the software version, and you know, they're both very good. They're both very good at what they do. So it just depends on if I'm physically over at the other studio, then I'll tend to do my mastering work over there because I kind of prefer to have the hardware version of that. But if I'm at home and I have a mastering job I got to do, or if I just want the Massive Passive on something, that's actually the kind of fun thing about it. It's a lot easier to patch stuff in if it's software. You can just like be creative about it, use it a little more liberally sometimes if it's in plugin form. But I do a lot of mastering stuff from here, from my my studio as well, typically in headphones when I'm doing that kind of stuff, and then I'll A/B it either at the other studio or things like that, because I got a 25-foot cathedral ceiling in here that makes like actually monitoring through the monitors, getting an accurate picture, though that pretty much impossible. But I do a ton of production work here. All right, what else we got? Any advice on how to create the sound of a big chorus stadium anthem type chorus production wise? We're not really going to dive into production right now. As far as like gang vocals go, there are definitely some techniques when it comes to recording vocals that will help make your vocals sound like they are actually like a gang, which I'll definitely go into more detail like as we get into like those parts of the course. But yeah, we'll certainly cover that stuff later. Let's see. What else we got? Not sure what was meant by lofty lyrics, Alina. It's okay. I'm not sure I said lofty lyrics. Maybe I did. But I'm not sure what the context of that is. Who's typically responsible for ensuring the song has good dynamics? Producer, engineer, mixing engineer, mastering engineer? Is this something the producer usually orchestrates? That's a great question. So I think dynamics, they come into play in the songwriting process, like right off the bat. So I think to a certain extent, the songwriter, who I don't even see like mentioned in that list of people, I think the songwriter is the first person who has something to do with the dynamics of the song. So your dynamics are, you can certainly produce a song to have dynamics that doesn't have a lot of dynamics in the songwriting, but it's certainly going to enhance it if your songwriting has dynamics built into it. And I think all good songs tend to have like good dynamics built into them for the most part, I think. And then it's really up to the producer to orchestrate how the different sections work together. And then they work either if the producer is the mix engineer, then they may be doing the engineering and producing at the same time. Like for example, like sometimes I'll hire an outside engineer to help me out with something, but a lot of times it's just me. I'm producing while I'm engineering. So, you know, I do a ton of vocal engineering. So I'll be like behind the console, like coaching the performance and things like that. So it's part of like the job of the producer, and anybody who's underneath them. You know, it's like, I don't really see it that way. When I work with people, there's some producers who kind of treat it a little differently, but, I just kind of see it as part of my team. But like, as a team, it's our job to like create something that has good dynamics. And then the mastering engineer, it's not really their job. The mastering engineer's job is like to make the finished mix sound as good as it can and prepare it for broadcast quality. And then the mix engineer can definitely bring out some dynamics and kind of amplify dynamics that are in the production. But once again, it's not the mix engineer's job to create the dynamics. The mix engineer's job is to see the vision of the producer through to completion. It's basically like kind of the producer's handing off the in progress work to the mix engineer to basically like glue it all together, make it sound coherent and cohesive, and then just give it like kind of like balance everything out is in my like, you know, that's kind of like my Cliff Notes version of what a mix engineer does. But yeah, but not so much like actually creating the dynamics, but they can amplify dynamics. I've found they could also like crank up stuff. I've definitely had mixing can be like a creative process because some mixers are very liberal in the way in which they play around with the original mix. they might really like something that's a little buried, and then they bring it way up into the foreground. And you're like, "Ooh, I'm not sure I like that." But then after a couple listens, I'm like, "Oh, that's like the best decision ever." So yeah, that can also affect dynamics. But I know a long answer, not an easy question to answer. I'll do a couple more questions here, and then I probably gotta get off the call. But let's see. Oh, let's see. Okay, cool. So I see you there, Joy Joe Bird. My abilities at a professional instrumentalist are limited. I have only recorded in professional studios for all my albums. I do not have a budget to produce a demo CD I'm assuming of this quality at this time. How do you propose those of us who aren't engineers and without home recording studios create our demos for this course? My music abilities are high, but my engineering abilities are amateur. So this is a great question. And the answer to that question is it's about making a team. So if you don't have production resources, you may have other resources. Like sounds like you have musical ability that you could bring to the table in collaboration with somebody who has producing ability. So really for anybody who doesn't have their own studio setup, or like, they're just their producer that they work with, or whatever your situation is, it's really where Kathy and I fully agree with what Kathy says. You have to be resourceful, and you have to like basically figure out, what do I have to offer in exchange for help with production? So if you don't have, like, sometimes like it's just a situation where some producers, they have to be paid up front to work with you. If you don't have that, what else do you have that you can bring? Do you have a great song? Do you have like do you know a vocalist that would be willing to do a favor for you that's like freaking awesome, and it'd be like a really good thing for the producer to work with this vocalist? I'm just thinking off the top of my head, there's so many different angles that you could bring into it. But it's like you gotta be resourceful, and that's part of, if you don't have the budget to pay for recordings, that's what you have to do. You have to be resourceful. And fortunately, this group is full of talented people that may be willing to collaborate with you. That's why we encourage people to come together and form teams, like songwriting teams. Here's the great thing about creating a team. If you have like 4 songwriters on your song, that's 4 people that you can pool resources together with. Find a producer. You can either pool all your money together and hire a producer together, or you could, pool all your resources together, have an awesome song that's like you feel really strongly about, and pitch it around. You can pitch it around. You may get feedback that it's not ready, or a producer who wants to work with you may want to make some tweaks and be involved in the songwriting. That's all part of negotiations. This is just kind of like a few of the things that pop into my head when you ask that question. We will definitely be talking about this more. We're going to talk about this more in depth when it comes to selecting your producer, and just certainly something we're going to be covering later on in the course. But that's my that's my answer, for a short answer for that. Hopefully that helps. I got time for one more question here. Let's see. What do we got? Hey, thanks all by the way, the audience, and encouraging, just like get better messages. What did you, this is actually a really good one, Lindsay. What do you recommend for mixing if you're an Ableton user? To use another DAW or a different program? I feel like mixing with an Ableton is not what I'm looking for. This is a really good point. I actually had somebody hire me recently to mix their song. They're a really capable Ableton producer, but it seems like, and I've used Ableton like maybe twice in my life. And it really wasn't like, I was trying to learn like 3 different DAWs at a time, and I just decided, you know what, I don't have time to learn Ableton right now. But one thing that we discovered when we were talking about having me mix the song is that it seems like Ableton is sort of woefully inadequate when it comes to kind of the standard way of mixing music, which is like creating buses. I don't really feel like there's a way in Ableton to create buses and effectively like do like it just seemed very convoluted and confusing to me and to him. And he's like Ableton's his main DAW. He ended up just exporting all of his stems, and then I mixed it in Pro Tools. So it's just like you may need to find somebody to partner with to mix your stuff if you're working in Ableton. But there may be some Ableton producers in here saying, "Hey, John, you're totally wrong, and this is how you do it." So, I always have an open mind to be wrong about things. So, but I've had people come to me and approach me. The only reason I specifically picked this question out was because, like, yep, I actually saw that very recently that somebody was having the same issues. So I don't think you're alone there. It seems like it's not one of the strengths of Ableton as a DAW. So you may need to partner with somebody who can help you out with the mixing on it. But there may be some producers here or elsewhere that may have useful information on that. I'm not the person who really knows much about mixing in Ableton though. That's unfortunately all the time we got for today. I hope you got a lot out of what I talked about today. I threw a lot of information your way. Thanks for listening to all of it. I'm going to, once again, this will be recorded. It's being recorded. It's going to get posted to the Facebook group along with the assignment. Probably sometime later today that's going to be posted. And looking forward to seeing what everybody's insights are and how they really take this assignment that I'm giving. I'm looking forward to seeing how all of you have your own kind of breakthroughs in the way in which you listen to music. Then will result in the way in which you create from here on. Go the rest of your day, wherever you're at.